Hello there. We have been talking about different story formats, and we have talked about the stage, the setup part, the initiation part, and now we are talking about the progress part, which is the third stage, where we talked about how Erin Brockovich is, going door to door in Hinckley and convincing people to come and take the legal services of Ed Mesry, and in film Gladiator, Maximus comes to know that his family is being killed, hanged, burned, and there is a tragic demise of his family. Now, subsequently, he is apprehended one more time. Now, this is really, really interesting. Now, as an audience, just think of a situation that you, as a viewer, just think of a situation where you know that your character is being ordered to be killed. He escapes from there. You know, as a viewer, that he will run back to his home. There is where he can take refuge. Exactly that happens. But when he reaches home, he realizes the place where he has come to take refuge is being, destroyed. Not only destroyed in physical sense, but in emotional sense also. Now, what do you expect? You expect now he will get up, he will be on his horse way back to Rome, meeting his people, conspiring against the king. Then he will take two or three opportunities to kill the king who is being illegitimately extended to the crown. This is what, as an audience, like when you watch a film, like suppose if I take a ticket and I go to watch a film, okay, just take an example of Pathan also. So you have, the moment I say that I am going to watch film Pathan, or I am going to watch film like this, I just saw Ganpat and all these things, as an audience, I will also have my story when I'm going to see a film. Obviously, the director will also have his story, he has made it. Now, there is a clash of what I think will be the story and what director is giving me the story. Now, there is a conflict between these two stories. Now, whether you believe what I'm saying or you don't believe, but with most of the people, it happens. Now, if your story wins in terms of director's story, and you say he could have done this, he could have done this, it could have performed better, and obviously the film that you went to see, you paid, and you saw on screen, so you will say, okay, it's not a good film. And if whatever story, like if I say Ganpat in my mind, so I have a sort of a tentative story in my mind, and I'm going to see the director's version. If his version, or her version for that matter, if there is a female director, is better than my version, I consider that film to be good. It's a psychological game which is happening not only in cinema hall, when you are watching anything on OTT also, when you are watching reels also for that matter. If like reel is in trend right now, so I tell you something about reel, which is like, again, a lot of work in Delhi, in Bombay, a lot of new lot of new students who have just passed out and started working in industry, they are being hired to make reels also. So anything, like if I say, like, so I was asked to write an advertisement recently, and he said that the advertisement is about this is what we are expecting. Now, the moment the client says that this is what my product and this is what I am expecting, that becomes a baseline. And the same case I'm saying in terms of Gladiator also. So he comes back, his family is killed and things like that. You start weaving your own story, and you say, okay, now this is what will happen. So fine. So when the client said to me that, Salim, this is what my product is and this is what it should be. So that becomes a baseline, his version of the story. And if now, as a writer, if I can, surprise him within the framework that he has given me, he will like my idea. That is the assurance. Now, a lot of people say, sir, what is a good idea? Good idea is when when you cross the expectation of your client, that becomes a good idea. He or she was not ready for a different version that you are providing. If you can provide, if you can convince, oh God, that is called a good idea. That is called a good idea, and it always works. Like a lot of people ask me, sir, that should we impress client, or or for that matter producer, or should we impress audience? Why don't they understand one thing? I always tell them that, or even the producer or the client is not coming from Mars. They are not coming from Mars. I said it Mars. They are not coming from Mars. They are people. They are one of the audience. And if you are able to impress one of the audience, chances are that you will be able to impress the audience. These are not two different, set of people. They are not. So I always say that if, like samples, I always say that if you really want to check the quality of rice, like suppose you go to supermarket and you say, or you go to your kirana store and you say ki 10 kilo chawal chahiye. So you're not going to eat 10 kilo of rice. You're not going to, or every individual and saying, is this good, is this good? Producer is a sample. If you are able to convince the sample, and the sample is representing the population. If you are able to convince the sample, if you are judgment, sampling, different sampling techniques, a lot of things, but if your sample is right, population is already justified, or he is having all the characteristics of the population. So when in terms of writing, I always say that in terms of writing, it is always how logically you are thinking. How logically. Like we can talk about, we can take a scene from Aaron Brockovich, we can take a scene from Gladiator, we can take one scene from Diwar, we can take one scene from Mughal-e-Azam, we can take one scene from Bahubali, or Gunpath, or for that matter any film, and we can surgically we can explain it. But there is no point doing that, because it's a matter of heart. Heart, if you are able to convince heart, your business is good. I always talk about, I always take creativity in one hand and business in another hand. And I never, I do not weigh it, because it's not like one element is higher, other element is lower, or other element is higher, or this element is lower. There is an act of balancing between these two things. Now, if I make you understand that now, he is being broken, family killed. Now what can happen? I give you one side of the story, that he goes back, he rides, he came on a horse to this location because it's a Roman Empire. So he takes the same horse, goes back, collects his army, because in the beginning of the story he was the leader of Roman Empire, Roman army. So he collects his trustworthy people, and everybody was not very happy with Commodus, so they can conspire to kill him. You too Brutus type plot can be created, but that does not happen here. What happens? That first of all, he is like lost, because he has just his entire family is killed. He is like people captured him because they wanted to kill him, but he escapes from there. He escapes. He was to be executed. He escapes, come back home, finds that his family is being killed. He loses all his senses. The story that we have created, that he goes back, collects army, fight, kills, and you too Brutus, track will open, but that does not happen. And that's what called progress. What happens? That there is a character, Proximo is introduced in the story at this point of time, who is the leader of gladiators. That the name of the film is Gladiator. And right now, till now, we were talking about Roman army journal, Marcus Aurelius, Commodus, please take care of Roman Empire after me. No, no, sir. I'm a simple man. I'm very happy. I want to go home. Commodus comes to know, sends army to Maximus' house, kills them, burns them, hangs them, and comes back home. And here he orders that Maximus should be killed. So he is being taken to be killed, but he escapes, reaches home, completely destroyed, and now is being captured as a slave. Now think of the fall of the character, like suppose the fall of the angels, as people call it. Army journal is now become a slave. And slave of what sort? Of someone who will be fighting in arena. So Proximo, a character who is introduced here, captures him again. Now, what makes this particular film so interesting, I think, is exactly this point. Obviously, like suppose if I there is a film called Tufan, which is Amitabh Bachchan, I think late 80s or early 90s, So the name of the film is Tufan. So Tufan kaise bana? There is where the strength lies. Ganpat is Ganpat, fine, but if there is no justification of his powers, or Tufan's power for that matter, very interesting film. I really enjoyed watching it when I was a kid. And then I realized that there was an entire plethora of these sort of films in Hollywood in 1975, like Sinbad the Sailor and things like that. And there was live action happening. I forgot the name of that special individual. He specialized in making life size like electro creatures, and like very, very interesting films that he has made. I think in the same has been tried to achieve in Tufan also. I, as a kid, really enjoyed that film. I never find the reason why it was not a super hit. Now I understand why it was not a super hit. Had it been made like Sinbad the Sailor, it would have it must have been a huge hit. Now, the reason for, like, if the name, now the name itself, very interesting for these two films. There is a real lady called Erin Brockovich, and the film portrays the life of Erin Brockovich also, and the name of the film is Erin Brockovich also. Now they are talking about a film called Gladiator, but Gladiator is not Gladiator. In the beginning of the film, he is a journal. But why a journal? Now again the question is that if I have been a journal in an army, even if I am captured, I would say that I was a journal, don't treat me like this. But if he is not saying that he has been the journal of Roman army, which he reveals quite late in the film, actually. When he's talking to, first he explained it to Proximo, and then he explains it to Commodus, and what a powerful dialogue, that I am father to a murdered son, I am husband to a murdered wife, and I have been, very, very interesting dialogues are there. Now, this Proximo becomes really important in terms of film production also, because he dies during the shoot. So it becomes very difficult for the team to create the CGI of this particular character. His brother was called in, and a lot of stories are there. But what is important, that this character Proximo actually, once, look, it's like Dark Knight also, that once your character is broken, which usually happens almost like 75% of the story, your character is broken at that point of time, then he or she recollects himself or herself and then comes in full force and fights with the antagonist. But think of it that you are doing this at almost 25 or 30% of the film. Then you really have to take care of this individual. Otherwise, if you're breaking your character at almost at 30% of the film, where you're only 30% of the film is being made or shown to audience, you really have to be extra careful when it comes to this kind of a situation. So Proximo, what he does, he not only captures him but understand the potential of Maximus, and he influences Maximus, he achieves considerable influence and prowess within the realm of gladiatorial combat. Now, if you say that he is a gladiator, you really have to create that world, because that is the title of the film. Now, how do you justify that he is gaining considerable influence and prowess within the realm of gladiatorial combat? Creating scenes like those is where you either make your film or you actually break your film. And this specific area is what, as Indian filmmakers, I have no shame saying, I am not shameful when I'm saying it, this is where the process, it is not that Ganpat is a good fighter. Okay, fine, Ganpat is a good fighter, we accept it. But what is the reason that Ganpat is a good fighter? What is the background to Ganpat? Because he fights in an arena, that's why he is a good fighter. What was the need for Ganpat to have this sort of a skill? If you do not attach that sort of a story, it is not a matter of flashback. Please understand. It is like I was going with my mother to market, some goon comes, there is a sudden shootout, and my mothers get killed, and this is how I become Ganpat, or this is how I become combat individual. This is like, technically there is a very beautiful term. This is called lazy writing. We really have to get out of the mold of this lazy writing, that okay, something will create some justification. No, the justification is where the strength lies. The audience becomes the element of believability that I have always been talking about. How believable. Trust me, out of this lecture, if you understand that there is something called element of believability, and I have to work on the element of believability, you as a director, you as a writer, you as a creative person, trust me, will improve yourself. If you are here, I can assure you that you will reach here within few days. But you should know that how I should create the element of believability. Now, if he is saying that gladiator Maximus is captured by Proximo, and he with him not only understand the world of gladiators, but also gets considerable influence and prowess within the realm of gladiatorial combat. The journey itself it should be so logical that it keeps on crawling up in the mind of the audience, and they must say, हाँ ऐसा कुछ हो सकता है, हाँ ऐसा हुआ होगा. The moment you are able to secure this sort of a reaction from audience, you have glued your audience to the seats in theatre. During the subsequent quarter of the narrative, the protagonist's strategic approach exhibits signs of success as they actively pursue their actively pursue their objectives. Now, it may be observed in the scenario where, like, now let's take an example of Mission Impossible. Now, there was something called if you see Mission Impossible 2, the moment you are coming close to the interval time, which is like from 25% to 50%, Ethan Hunt is he is narrowing down on the whereabouts of the antagonist. If you talk about There is something about Mary. If you have not seen this film, these are the films of my time or my generation where we laughed with these films and we were in love with these films. There is something about Mary. It's a comedy film, but what vicious comedy it is, and we were not exposed to this sort of a cinema, and when we got to know that something like this also exist, so it was absolutely a new and shocking reality for us. And if you take for that example, if you take example of this film, There Is Something About Mary, or Ethan Hunt, or where you, regardless of the protagonist, challenge the denominators of the ability to navigate and surmount these obstacles. Now all these examples are fine. Let's come to turning point 3. So I explained, the world of Erin Brockovich and Gladiator, what is happening. So that is the world where this is happening. Now think it in terms of turning point, which is like the most important element. That is the strength of this particular structure. Now, in the film Erin Brockovich, the character Erin and Ed Mesery, the lawyer, takes the initiative to initiate legal proceedings despite the potential risk of having their case dismissed by the presiding judge. Such a dismal will basically affect the entire case. It will sweep the entire case. So that pressure, that urgency, that effort, that will, and like, think of a situation like, think this Erin Brockovich thing, where the chances of dismissal is very, very high. Like, suppose I'm a farmer, think of a situation, or I'm a student, like, because you are a student, so suppose you are a student and you know that your principal, when you are going to your principal's room, he will not listen to what you are saying because you have done some blunder yesterday. You are very sure of it. Your parents are going with you in the principal room. They know that there is no way out, and we are really going to listen to the principal because he or she, whatever the gender of the child is, that he has done or she has done a mistake. Now, when you go in the principal room as a child, and imagine that you really turn the table there, not only it will shock principal, not only it will shock your parents, seen film, it will shock the audience also. And that is what precisely happens at this point of time in Erin Brockovich. What it happens, how it happens, I am not telling you. You have to watch it for yourself. But that is what precisely happens. I have given you one Indian situation on this particular case. That is what exactly happens. And I remember when I saw this film in cinema hall, people were like, very interestingly, they were clapping in cinema hall because it was such. And there was one more scene where it happened. Now, in terms of Gladiator, what happens? The protagonist Maximus make his way to Rome with the resolute intention of generating the favor of the audience as a gladiator, with the ultimate objective of vanquishing or destroying Commodus. At this precise juncture, the protagonist must dedicate himself or herself to the pursuit of his or her objective wholeheartedly. Until this juncture, she possessed the alternative of retracing his or her steps, relinquishing his or her endeavor, and reverting to the existence she has or he had been leading at the commencement of the cinematic narrative. However, the protagonist must now sever all ties and should be fully committed to his or her action. At this very juncture, Thelma and Louise engage in an act of robbing the grocery shop, Truman. If you have not seen this film, please watch. Truman Show is the name of the film. Truman, traverses the bridge in the Truman Show. The Ross engages, in a romantic encounter with Jack in Titanic. The protagonists in these films assume far higher level of danger and subjected themselves to greater peril than in any preceding instance. As a result of passing this point of no return, your hero must face a new situation, which is called Stage 5 Complications and Higher Stakes. As you can see on your screen, now we are moving from 50 to 75% of the portion. Now see what happens in the story. Now, in terms of this, passing on the situation, in film Erin Brockovich, the character Erin, experiences a diminishing presence of George and her children. Additionally, Ed introduces a prominent legal entity that attempts to marginalize Erin involvement and estranges the Hinckley's plaintiff. In Gladiator, what happens? The protagonist Maximus encounters formidable challenges within the arena. Formidable challenges within the arena, that is where the strength lies, that is where the strength of the film lies, subsequently earning the admiration of Roman populace and ultimately divulging his authentic persona to Commodus. That is all in this video. Please watch these two films called Erin Brockovich and Gladiator, and we will discuss further. Thank you very much.